I told Preston Locke, plainly and for nothing, that the pass would kill him if he tried it that night. He told me to mind my own business and learn my place. About 8 hours later, his place turned out to be a snowbank at 11,000 feet, with the engine dead and the heat gone. And mine turned out to be the only set of headlights in 100 miles coming up the mountain to find him. He had spent the afternoon making very sure I understood that he was an important man, and I was a used-up old one. He had no idea. Standing in the warm light of that little gas station, looking down his nose at my plow truck, that before the night was over, he was going to be on his knees in the dark, and that the hands he would be praying for would be the same ones he had waved off like I was the help. By morning, the man who told me to learn my place had learned his, and he had learned it from the mountain, which is a far harder teacher than I would ever have been. This is the story of the night the storm came down and took the difference between a rich man and a poor one and buried it under 6 feet of snow. My name is Brennan. I am 55 years old, and I live at the bottom of a mountain that most people only ever see from the warm side of a windshield. There is a pass up over that mountain, a high one, the kind that is a postcard in July and a death sentence in February. And for 30 years, I have been one of the handful of people who knows it in all its moods. I run the plow truck and the tow rig for that stretch of road, which does not pay much, and I volunteer for the county search and rescue team, which does not pay anything at all. And between the two, I have spent a good part of my life going up that mountain in weather that sends everyone else down it. I do not look like much. That is not false modesty, it is just true. I am a grey, weathered man in old Carhartts who drives a plow truck with a cracked windshield, and to a certain kind of traveller passing through, I am scenery. I am part of the rough local colour, a man you would not look at twice unless you needed your tank filled or your bumper pulled out of a ditch. I have made my peace with that. The mountain does not care what anybody looks like, and after 30 years, neither do I. The mountain has its own way of finding out who a man really is, and it does not need a nice jacket to tell. There is a special kind of helplessness in watching a person drive straight at a danger you can see plainly and they refuse to. And most people have felt it at least once. Stay with this one to the end, because the mountain has its own answer to that kind of pride. And the answer is terrible and merciful in the very same breath. There is a reason I will not, cannot, let a person drive onto that pass in a building storm, no matter who they are or how they speak to me. And Preston Locke had no way of knowing it, and you should, because it decided everything that came after. The reason is buried up near the top of that mountain, under a cairn of rocks I built with my own hands a long time ago. His name was Ellie. He was my younger brother, and he was 22 years old. And he loved that mountain the way I do, which is to say more than was ever entirely safe. One February, when I was a young man and thought I knew the pass better than I did, Ellie went up to check on a stranded family I had heard about on the radio, ahead of me, because he was faster, and I told him to go and I would follow with the truck. The storm closed in between us. By the time I fought my way up to where he should have been, the world had gone white and silent, and I could not find him. And the truth is, no one could have, not in that. And I have told myself that 10,000 times and believed it on maybe half of them. We found Ellie in the spring, when the snow let him go. He had reached the family. They lived. He had given them his coat and his gloves and the heat of his own body in the back of their car until the cold took him. Sometime in the night, a few hundred yards from where I was turning my truck around because I could not see my own hands in front of me. I was 28. Eli was 22. He had our mother's easy way with people and none of my caution, and he should have had 50 more years, and the arithmetic of that has never once balanced for me, no matter how many times I have run it on the long drives. For a good while after, I could not go up the mountain at all. I gave up the plow contract, I quit the rescue team, I spent the better part of 2 years angry at a peak the way you can only be angry at a thing that cannot hear you. And I would have stayed down at the bottom of it forever. Except that the second winter I was gone, A family slid off the road near that same third switchback. And the man who went up in the storm that should have been me did not know the pass the way I did. And it took him most of the night to find them. And one of the children very nearly did not come down. I lay awake 100 miles away that night, pretending I had moved on. And I understood something. I could grieve my brother by abandoning the mountain to people who did not know it. Or I could grieve him by becoming the person up there who did, and only one of those was a way Eli would have recognized. So I came back. I took the contract again. I put his compass in my coat. And I have not been off that mountain in a storm since. Because the day I decide some stranger is not worth the cold is the day I have finally, truly, lost him. I carry his compass. It is a plain brass thing, scratched, the needle still true. And it rides in the chest pocket of my coat every time I go up. And I have built the whole back half of my life around a single rule that Eli wrote for me without ever saying a word, which is that you do not leave people on the mountain. You do not get to decide they deserve it. You do not get to weigh whether they were kind to you at the gas station. The mountain does not make those distinctions, and neither do the people who answer to it. You go up, and you bring them down, or you die trying. Because somewhere up there is a younger brother who gave a stranger his coat, and you do not get to be the man who decided some strangers are not worth the cold. So when Preston Locke rolled into Cassie's station that afternoon, with the sky already going the wrong color over the peaks, the storm was not a question for me. The only question was him. Cassie's station is the last fuel and the last warm room before the pass. A little outfit she keeps alive mostly on stubbornness. 2 pumps and a coffee maker, and a few shelves of the things a traveler forgets. Cassie is 30 or so, and she runs it alone since her father passed. And she runs it at a loss, more months than not. Because somebody has to be the last lit window before the mountain. And she has decided it is going to be her, for as long as she can hold on. Her father had run that station before her, for 40 years. And the story in town, the one Cassie does not tell but the old-timers do, is that he kept it open through every storm, because one night back in the 70s, a family had frozen in their stalled car not 3 miles up the road, having driven past a dark, closed station because there was nowhere else to stop. After that, he decided that as long as he drew breath, there would always be one lit window before the mountain, at any hour, in any weather, whatever it cost him. He kept that promise for 40 years. Cassie was raised inside it. When he died, everyone assumed she would sell, because only a fool runs a business that loses money on purpose, and Cassie just quietly kept the lights on, and kept them on, and kept them on, year after thankless year, because some promises get handed down like furniture, and she was not going to be the one who let the window go dark. The town had forgotten all of that. The town was about to remember. I was inside warming up and watching the weather when Preston Locke's big SUV pulled in, gleaming, the kind with screens for mirrors, and the man got out, already annoyed at the existence of the place. He was maybe 50, well-fed and well-dressed and moving fast, the way men move when they have spent their whole lives being able to make the world hurry up by being unpleasant. He was on the phone, talking about a deal, a closing, somewhere on the other side of that mountain that he needed to be at in the morning. And he treated Cassie's station like an inconvenience that had been placed in his path on purpose. He snapped at Cassie about the card reader being slow. He complained, loudly, about there being no proper coffee. And when Cassie, who is kind to a fault and was trying to do the man a genuine favor, mentioned gently that the pass was closing and that the highway department was about to drop the gate, he looked at her like she had spoken out of turn. I had watched him be unkind to Cassie 3 separate times in under 5 minutes. And Cassie is the kind of person who absorbs it, who has been taught by a hard life and a harder business to fold herself up small and keep the customer happy. And that is its own quiet injustice that I have watched play out at that counter for years. She told him, gently, twice, that the highway department's own forecast had the gate dropping within the hour, that this was not her opinion, but the state's, and both times he brushed it aside as though she were trying to sell him something he had not asked for. He had a way of not hearing a woman in an apron that was so total it was almost a kind of deafness. The same deafness, I would think later, that the mountain was about to cure in him for good. There was a weather radio on the shelf behind the register, and it was saying, in the flat synthetic voice those broadcasts use, the very thing I was saying and Cassie was saying. The travel over the pass was strongly discouraged, that conditions would deteriorate rapidly after dark, that motorists should seek shelter now. He heard none of it. A man who has spent his whole life as the loudest voice in every room builds a real talent for not hearing the quiet ones, even when the quiet ones are the only ones telling him the truth. And that afternoon, the weather service, and Cassie and I were all, to a man like Preston Locke, very quiet ones indeed. That is when I made the mistake of trying to help. I told him, civil as I know how, that I ran the plow and the rescue on that pass, that I had been watching this exact storm build all day, and that the mountain was about to do something he did not want to be on it for. I told him there was a motel 40 minutes back that would still have rooms, and that the pass would open by midday tomorrow once we got the plows up, and that whatever the deal was on the other side, it would keep one more night. Because everything keeps one more night except the things that do not, and a man caught on that pass tonight would be one of the things that did not. He looked me up and down, the cracked windshield of my truck out the window behind me, the old coat, the grey, and he smiled the way certain men smile right before they say something cruel and call it honesty. He told me he had four-wheel drive and a schedule, and that he did not need survival tips from somebody whose whole life had clearly fit inside this gas station. He told me that some people make things happen and some people plow the road for the people who do, and that I should stick to the plowing and let him worry about the driving. He told me, and these were close to his exact words, to learn my place. Then he paid Cassie without looking at her, and he got back in his gleaming truck, and he drove up onto the mountain that had killed my brother. Into a storm I had spent 30 years learning to fear, because a man whose whole power came from never being told no could not bear to be told no by a hick in a gas station. I want to be honest with you about what I felt, watching his taillights go up into the white, because it is not the noble thing you might expect. I did not feel worried for him, not at first. I felt the ugly little flicker of a man who has just been insulted and is, God help him, a small part glad that the universe is about to handle it for him. For about 30 seconds I stood in Cassie's warm doorway and let myself think the thought. The one that says, let him go. He was warned. He made his bed. It is a very human thought, and I am not proud of it, and I am telling you about it because the whole point of this comes next. Because then I looked at the compass on the counter where I had set it. Eli's compass. The needle pointing the way it always points, north, true, indifferent to whether the man up that mountain had been kind to me and the 30 seconds were over. There is no version of me that gets to keep that compass in my pocket and also leave a man on the mountain to teach him a lesson. The two things cannot live in the same coat. So I poured the last of Cassie's coffee into my thermos, and I told her to call the county and let them know I was going up. And I went out to the plow truck, while every sensible part of me argued the whole way. It got bad faster than even I expected, and I have seen it get bad. By the time I had the chains on and the truck pointed up the grade, the storm had stopped being weather and become a thing with intent. The wind came across the pass in slabs. The snow was not falling so much as the whole world had turned to it, and my headlights bounced back off a wall of white that moved and breathed and hid the road I have driven 10,000 times. I went up in the lowest gear, plowing as I climbed, because the only way up was to make the road exist a few feet at a time. And I talked to the county on the radio in the calm voice you learn to keep when calm is the only tool that works. And somewhere below me, I knew, Cassie was standing at her window, watching one more set of taillights go up into the thing that takes people. And I knew exactly what that costs her, because she had watched it take her own father once. I have gone up that pass in the dark more times than I can count, and I have never once gotten used to the particular loneliness of it. The way the headlights only show you the snow, and the snow only shows you more snow, so that you climb a mountain you cannot see, toward a person you are not certain is still alive, steering by memory and feel and the small, true needle in your pocket. You learn to drive it by the road's bones, the way the grade shifts under the tires, the lean of the truck in a turn, the places where the wind always comes from the same quarter. You learn to keep your speed down and your panic lower, because panic on that mountain is just a slower way of dying. And the men who go off the road are almost never the ones who lacked horsepower. They are the ones who lacked patience, who could not stand to crawl, who were certain their machine could outrun a thing that has been there since before there were machines. So I crawled. I plowed and I crawled, and I talked to the county every few minutes in the flat, calm voice. And I thought about Eli, the way I always do up there. Not sadly, more like a man checking that a passenger is still buckled in beside him. Somewhere above me, in all that white, was a stranger who had told me to learn my place. And the strange mathematics of the mountain was that none of it mattered anymore. Not one bit. Because up there are only ever two kinds of people, the ones who need to come down and the ones who can bring them. And I was the second kind. And that was the whole of who I was now. The only part the mountain would let me keep. The call came over the radio about an hour up. A passing trucker, chains on, crawling down the other side, had seen an SUV off the road above the third switchback, nose down in the deep stuff at the edge of a drop, hazards barely glowing through the snow. No movement that he could see. He could not stop on that grade, or he would never get going again. And he was right not to. And he gave the location the best he could, and wished whoever was coming good luck. And that was that. Above the third switchback, I knew the spot. It is a bad one, a place where the road bends hard with a long way down on the outside, and a man who took it too fast in the white, sure of his four-wheel drive, would go exactly off the edge the trucker described. I will be straight about the next part. The one moment all night that I nearly turned the truck around had nothing to do with fear of the mountain, which I made my peace with long ago. It was the second the radio told me exactly where he was, and a tired, bitter voice somewhere in me said, out loud, in the empty cab, to no one at all, "He told you to learn your place." I heard it, I let it have its say, and then I dropped the truck into gear and kept climbing, because a man is not the worst voice inside him unless he chooses to obey it. And I had a brother who had earned my better one. I found the SUV where the trucker said, and it was worse than I hoped. It had gone off the outside of the bend and dropped maybe 15 feet down the slope and lodged against the only thing that had kept it from going all the way, which was a stand of stunted pines that the mountain, in what mercy it has, had put exactly there. The engine was dead, the fancy electronics were dark, and Preston Locke, the man who made things happen, was not in the warm cab where a person is supposed to stay. He had panicked, the way the unprepared always do, and he had climbed out and tried to walk for help in a whiteout, which is the thing that kills you. And he had made it perhaps 40 yards up the slope before the cold and the dark and the absolute sameness of everything had taken his legs out from under him. And that is where my light found him, on his knees in the snow, hatless, his expensive coat already rimed white, his hands jammed under his arms, rocking, making a sound I have heard before and will never get used to. The small animal sound a person makes when the thinking part of them has shut down and only the scared part is left. I have brought a lot of people off that slope, and there is no dignity in it, and no drama either. Just hard, cold, methodical work against a clock you cannot see. I anchored the rope to the truck and went down to him on it, kicking steps into the slope. And I did the things you do, the things 30 years drills so deep into your hands that your head stays free to stay calm. I checked that he was breathing, and that the breathing was not yet the dangerous, slow kind. I got him turned and braced. I told him my name, over and over, in a steady voice. Not because he could understand it, but because a human voice is a rope of its own to a man that far gone, a thing to climb toward. He could not help me. His hands would not close, and his legs would not hold. So it became a matter of getting the line around him right, and then hauling, a foot at a time, digging in, resting, hauling again, the snow coming sideways into my eyes, and the cold reaching through everything I had on. Twice I slipped, and we both slid back down some of what we had gained, and I started again. Because starting again is the entire job, on a mountain and in a life. It took the better part of an hour to move one man 40 yards. By the time I got him over the lip and onto the road and into the cab, there was nothing left in my arms, and nothing left in him at all but the shaking, and the shaking, at least, meant he was still in there. He did not know me. That is the thing. I came down that slope with a rope and a headlamp, and 30 years of knowing exactly how to do this. And I got to him and put my hands on him, and he looked up at me out of a face that could no longer make expressions. And there was nothing in it of the man from the gas station. The contempt was gone. The schedule was gone. The four-wheel drive and the deal and the place he had told me to learn were all gone. Scoured off him by the only thing on this earth that was never going to be impressed by any of it. And what was left, kneeling in the snow, holding onto my arm like a child, was just a man, cold and frightened and mortal. Exactly the same animal as every other man, which is the truth the mountain tells everyone eventually, and which most of us are lucky enough to be told more gently. I got my coat around him. I am aware of the symmetry of that, and I did not think about it at the time, but I have since, that the thing I did first, without deciding to, was the exact thing my brother did: give a freezing stranger my coat. I got him up the slope on the rope, which took most of an hour and most of what I had, and I got him into the warm cab of the Plow truck, and I poured Cassie's coffee into him, and I worked his hands and his feet the way you do. And slowly, painfully, the man came back into his body, and with the body came the understanding, and with the understanding came the thing I had not asked for and did not need, which was his face when he finally recognized me. He knew me. I watched it land. I watched him understand that the hick from the gas station, the used-up old man whose whole life fit inside that little building, was the person who had just come up a mountain in the worst storm in years and pulled him out of his own grave by a rope, and that no one else had come, and no one else was going to, and that the man he had told to learn his place was the entire and only reason he was going to see his children again. And he started to cry, the deep, broken way a grown man cries when something he was very sure of has just been taken away from him for good. And the thing that had been taken from Preston Locke was not his SUV, which is still up there, and it was not his deal, which he missed. It was the whole story he had been telling himself his entire life about who matters and who does not. The mountain took that from him and did not give it back. And I have come to believe that for a certain kind of man, that is the only gift large enough to change him. I did not say anything cruel to him. I want you to know that, because I had the whole night to, and a captive audience, and every right that the world would recognize. I did not, partly because my brother was somewhere up that same mountain, having given his coat to strangers. And you do not honor a man like that by lording his lesson over a broken one. And partly because there is nothing I could have said that the mountain had not already said better. A man who has knelt in the snow and made that sound does not need an old plow driver to explain to him what he got wrong. He needs coffee and warm hands and to be driven down to the lights, and to be allowed to sit with what he now knows in the quiet, which is the only place a thing like that ever really sinks in. So I drove him down. We did not talk much. There was not much that needed saying that the night had not already covered. What I will tell you about the days after is not the part you might expect, the apology and so on. Though that came, and it was real, and I will get to it. The part I want you to have is about Cassie and her gas station. Because that is the part the mountain did not arrange, and people did. When the story got around, and in a place like this it got around by the next afternoon, it was not the rich man going off the road that people fixed on. It was the rest of it. It was that Cassie had stood at her window all night with the county on speaker, refusing to close, keeping the last lights on and the coffee hot in case anybody came down off that mountain needing them, the way her father had taught her, the way she does every storm for a town that mostly forgets she is out there until they need her. People remembered, all at once, what that little station on the edge of nothing actually is, which is a lifeline. The last warm room before the cold, kept lit at a loss by a woman who could have walked away from it 100 times and never did. And the town, which had let her struggle alone for years, decided more or less overnight that it was not going to let the last lit window before the mountain go dark for want of a few dollars. I will keep the particulars to myself, because Cassie would be mortified to hear them recited. But that station is not running at a loss anymore, and it is not going anywhere. And there is a new generator out back, and a real coffee machine inside, and a hand-painted sign by the road that a local kid made that says, simply, "Last light before the pass." Which is what the truckers have called it for years, and what it has finally, officially, become. Preston Locke came to find me about a week later, once he could walk right again. And the one thing I will say for him is that he came alone, on his own 2 feet, without his money or his lawyers or his certainty. He stood in my yard, a smaller and quieter man than the one who had told me to learn my place. And he tried to find words for a thing that does not have good ones. And I let him struggle with it, because the struggling was the realest part. He did not offer me a reward. I think he understood, somewhere in that long, cold night, that there was no number that fit, and that offering one would have undone the only thing he had gotten right, which was coming in person with empty hands. He told me he had spent 30 years certain that the world was divided into people who matter and people who do not, and that he had been wrong about which was which, and that he was going to spend whatever he had left trying to be the second kind, the kind that keeps the lights on for strangers, instead of the first. I told him that was a fine thing to decide, and that the mountain would be checking. We are not friends, but he sends Cassie's station business now, routes his company's trucks through it on purpose, tells the drivers to stop and tip well, and a man's truest apologies are usually the quiet ones he never mentions, the ones you only find out about by accident. I still have Eli's compass. It still rides in my chest pocket up the mountain, and the needle still points north, true and patient, and not caring in the slightest who I am going up to bring down. I did not give it to anyone at the end of this, the way a story might want me to, because some things are not yours to pass on yet. And a compass that has shown me the way home through 30 years of white is not finished showing me. But I will tell you what I did, the next bad storm, when the gate was about to drop. I taught Cassie's nephew, who is 16 and wants to join the rescue someday, how to read it. How to trust the needle when your own eyes are lying to you, which is the whole of the thing, on a mountain and most everywhere else. He will get the compass someday. Not yet. There is a good deal of weather between here and then, and I intend to drive up into all of it. I am going to send you off with something other than the question I usually get. There is a person in your life right now who knows something you do not, and who does not look like much, and who has been trying to tell you a true thing that your pride does not want to hear. The mountain in this story is not really a mountain. It is just the place where the bill finally comes due for deciding that the people who plow your road could not possibly know anything worth your listening. Listen to them. And the next time someone who can do nothing for you tries to warn you, or help you, or simply asks to be treated like a person, remember Preston Locke on his knees in the snow, learning the hardest way there is, that the man you told to learn his place may turn out to be the only one coming for you in the dark. Tell me in the comments about the person who knew the road when you did not. I read every one. And drive safe out there. The last light before the pass is on, and somebody good is keeping it that way.